David is got about 600 men with him. His band has grown. People continue to join him. It's an indication of David's leadership. Saul, and some of the indications are that maybe it's starting to become knowledge that David has been anointed the next king. Saul is certainly aware of this. Maybe some are coming to David because they know the house of Saul is going to no longer reign in Israel. That David and his men have fled from outside the borders of Israel. If you remember, they went south to the area of Panram. And here, a man named Nabal is sending his sheep. He's of some considerable wealth. It says he has 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats. It's going to take a lot of land to graze this many animals. Custom, I guess the best way to put it would be to have, as your shepherds are in the field, you would hire a group of people to protect your flocks, protect your shepherds from other people coming and taking your flocks and killing your shepherds and running away with them. So the indication here is David has been hired, or maybe David has entered into this agreement. It comes time for Nabal to pay, and what does he tell him? No, I'm not going to do it. Why should I take, basically, why should I spend my money paying you? And David reminds him of what they had done. And we see David's response to this situation was, I'm going to go kill Nabal. I'm going to take what is mine. Very different than what we have normally seen about David, and we kind of speculated some of the things that were going on. I was asked to go back to lesson number 7, if you have your book, on page 63, just for a moment. And I was asked to cover a little bit about question 2. As we talked a little bit about question 3, why do we think David reacted the way he did? We talked about that last week. Some of the supposition is, he's hurt, he's angry, but maybe he sees the injustice done to his men. And as the leader of this group, he wants to seek vengeance because of his men. But question 2, I was asked about this morning, why do individuals sometimes struggle to express gratitude? Why do we struggle to express gratitude? And maybe it's a different answer for different people. Maybe it's a different answer for different situations.
It can have something to do with the fashion in which you were raised. Some men find it hard to express such a deep emotion as gratitude. We weren't taught to do that.
Okay.
That's why we have wives.
Maybe pride also.
Pride?
Sometimes we feel we did it on our own instead of giving acknowledgement that comes from God.
Okay, yeah.
There's thanksgiving involved, blessings. For example, the country we live in, I wonder all the time how I'm so blessed to be here at this time.
So some of it is we don't want to acknowledge that we didn't do it by ourselves. There would be what's the word I'm looking for, a humility there. We'd have to humble ourselves to the point of admitting we are not able to do all of this on our own. I think Tommy's right. Sometimes it's based on the way you were raised. Was that an emotion, or was that a pattern that you saw displayed? Was that taught in your house? I think as I think about this story of Nabal, I don't think he wants to express the gratitude because of his greed. Him expressing gratitude to David means I'm going to have to give you what you've earned. I'm going to have to pay. And I am such a greedy person, I don't want to do that. I'm holding on to this as tight as I can possibly hold on to it. Other thoughts on why we struggle to express gratitude?
Of course, in the case of Nabal, it has to do with the name. The scriptures talk about him being a scoundrel, being foolish, and it's pride, it's greed, all those things gathered together. And you see that even his servant speaks of him that way. He speaks of his master that way. The servants are treated that way, is what it gives you the impression.
Right.
So it makes you an idea of, okay, how did he treat his herdsmen and his shepherds that took care of his flock? And you notice in the scriptures it talks about him making a feast as a king. It doesn't say who he invited. It was all for him. Because he looks inward to himself only, and he neglects, this is my opinion, he neglects those who work for him, even his family perhaps. So his idea of gratitude is only that, yeah, I'll build bigger barns.
Right. I talked about the parable that Jesus had told there about the man when he looks at his harvest and he sees how bountiful his harvest was. His reply was not, I can share with the poor, I can give this away, I can feed the needy. His response was greed for myself. How am I going to hold on to all of this? I'll tear down my barns, I'll build bigger barns. I'll keep it for me. And God's response was, tonight, your soul is required of you. You know, it was no second chance even given to this man from what we see in the scriptures. I thought of, as Tommy was speaking, a couple of thoughts here. In Ephesians chapter 6, Paul writes about the master and servant relationship that they were to have in the early church. And they were not to treat their servants harshly. And in the case of when both of them were members of the church, they were to consider them brethren. There was some equality that was to be viewed by the master on this servant. Remember when Paul sends Onesimus back to Philemon, how does he tell him to receive him? As one in the faith. You don't receive this man as a runaway slave. You know, what was the punishment under Roman law if a slave ran away and was found? They could be put to death. They could execute the slave. And Paul is sending Onesimus back to Philemon, and he tells him, you treat him as one in the faith. So, and the other thought is, we did read, you know, how the servants feel about Nabal here. They call him a scoundrel. They call him, I don't remember what the King James translated the name as.
His name was translated as fool.
Well, his name was translated as fool, but he called a son of Belial is how they translated where they calls a scoundrel. In the New King James, they translate it scoundrel. Some of your translations have the son of Belial. The servant's calling his master a name to the master's wife. So that kind of tells you the relationship that the servant has with the wife, and probably the relationship the wife has with Nabal. How Abigail feels about Nabal, because one of the servants is comfortable enough coming to her and telling her, hey, your husband, he's pretty useless. you know. Now, wives, I've been married 27 years. I know there's times that we irritate you. Not often, but we irritate you sometimes. But I don't know how many of you would still want somebody coming to you and degrading your husband. You know, how maybe we make you that mad sometimes you're okay with it. You know, we're kind of oblivious some days. But this servant feels comfortable enough degrading Nabal to Abigail. So it really does kind of tell you some of the character of this man and the reputation he has. So I think in this case, you know, we really see how, is vile the right word? This man Nabal really is. He's unable to express any gratitude what has been done for him because he is so self-centered. He is so greedy. There's an element of pride about him, and we learn it all from his name. When your name means foolish one, it probably is applying to every aspect of your life. And we see that in multiple ways through this story. Any other thoughts? Any other comments on expressing gratitude? If not, let's go down to verse 23. I think your book says verses 23 through 42 is the reading for today. I have them up on the slide, or if you'd prefer to use your translation, 1 Samuel 25 verses 23 through 42, and we will let our readers read through this for us, if they would.
Now when Abigail saw David, she dismounted quickly from the donkey, fell on her face before David, and bowed down to the ground. So she fell at his feet and said, "O me, my lord of me, let such iniquity be, and please let your maidservant speak in your ears and hear the words of the maidservants. But please let not my lord regard this scoundrel Nabal, for his name he is the Nabal, his name, and folly is with him. But I, your maidservant, did see the young men of my lord when we sinned. Now therefore, my lord, as the Lord lives and as your soul lives, since the Lord has held you back from coming to bloodshed and from avenging yourself with your own hands, now let your enemies and those who speak harm for my Lord be named Nabal. And now his presence, which your maidservants had brought to my Lord, let it be given to the young men who follows my Lord. Please forgive the trespass of your maidservant, for the Lord will certainly make you, my Lord, an enduring house, because my Lord fights the battles of the Lord, and evil is not found in your thoughts your days. Yet a man has risen to pursue you and speak you life, but the life of my Lord shall be bound in the bundle of living with the Lord your God. And the lives of your enemies he shall sling out as from the pockets of a sling. And it shall come to pass when the Lord has done for the Lord according to all the good that he's spoken concerning you, and has appointed you ruler over Israel. Now this will be no grief to you, no offense of heart to my Lord, neither that you have shed blood without cause, or that my Lord has avenged himself. But when the Lord has dwelt your maidservant." Then David said to Abigail, "Blessed is the Lord God of Israel, who sent you this day to meet me."
May you be blessed for your good judgment and for keeping me from bloodshed this day and from avenging myself with my own hands. Otherwise, as surely as the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, who has kept me from harming you, if you had not come quickly to meet me, not one male belonging to Nabal would have been left alive Then David accepted from her hand what she had brought him and said, "Go home in peace. I have heard your words and granted your request." When Abigail went to Nabal, he was in the house holding a banquet like that of a king. He was in high spirits and very drunk. So she told him nothing until daybreak. Then in the morning, when Nabal was sober, his wife told him all these things, and his heart failed him, and he became like a stone. About 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal, and he died. When David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, "Praise be to the Lord, who has upheld my cause against Nabal for treating me with contempt. He has kept his servant from doing wrong and has brought Nabal's wrongdoing down on his own head." Then David sent word to Abigail, asking her to become his wife. His servants went to Carmel and said to Abigail, "David has sent us to you to take you to become his wife." She bowed down with her face to the ground and said, "Here is your maidservant, ready to serve you and wash the feet of my master's servants." Abigail quickly got on a donkey and, attended by her 5 maids, went with David's messengers and became his wife.
All right, thank you. So here's the end of the story for us. David and Abigail. She will become his second wife. Remember, he is married to the daughter of Saul, Michal. This is a very tumultuous relationship between the two of them. And even after this, Saul takes Michal, even though she's still married to David, and gives him to another man to be his wife. And after David becomes king, he goes and forcibly takes her back into his house. But with David and Abigail here, as we talked last week, the servant has come to Abigail, told him what her husband has done. She realizes, I don't know if the servant knew more than what is recorded. Maybe the servant knew the threat that David's men were coming. Maybe he was just trying to prevent something from ever happening between David and Nabal. Whichever situation it is, Abigail realizes the urgency of the situation. She realizes how her husband has responded is not correct, and I need to rectify the situation quickly. If you remember last week, the first thing she does is she sends a servant to go meet David and tell him, "Hey, we're bringing what is due. It's on its way." And then she begins to prepare the lambs. She bakes bread. She makes cakes of figs. She brings clusters of figs. And she basically prepares this feast for David and his men. It would be considered part of their payment for what they had been doing. She rides out to meet him. If you remember, David has made the oath already that no male out of the house of Nabal will live. Any children she may have had, we're not told of any, but any male servant, all of these people were going to die at the hands of David and his men. He's bringing 400 mercenaries with him. And they're upset, shall we say? They're a little mad, shall we say? So David sees, or Abigail, I guess, sees David riding toward him, and she falls down on the ground. This sign of respect for someone, and this would be highly unusual. Be highly unusual for a couple of reasons. One, she's riding a donkey. Not what women normally did in this culture. It would have been something very unusual. It also would be very unusual for women in this culture to be out without their husband. So this would certainly get David's attention that this is completely against the customs of what we're seeing. And then for her to take charge of the situation would be very unusual. All of these negotiations always happened between the men. The women were never involved. So this would be a very unique situation that's happening here. Today, we read this story and we don't really think about all of these cultural and cultural aspects, I guess would be a good way to put it, of the story, and even the time period of the story. This just was not done. Women did not go out and negotiate with men on any kind of business deal. It just was not done. If they were not married, their father was responsible for their well-being. If their father died, the oldest brother, whether he was older than her or younger than her, it became his responsibility to negotiate anything on her behalf. When you go back to Leviticus, and I would have to look the exact chapter up, I just thought of this, I didn't think of this earlier, or I would have looked it up. Even if a woman made a pledge, for whatever reason, if she made a pledge and her father found out about it, he could override the pledge if she was unmarried. If her husband found out about the pledge and he disagreed, he would override her. And no matter what she had pledged, the contract was voided. So for Abigail to go out and to take charge of these situations, highly unusual in this culture. But she sees David, and she understands what's about to happen. She understands that David's not coming to try to have another meeting with Nabal. She understands maybe by the way they're riding, by the number of men he took, by the way they're armed. Remember, what were they to do? Strap on your sword, and let's go. So she stops David, and then in verse 25, look how she refers to her husband. Do not let my Lord reground this scoundrel. Again, some of your translations have this word, the son of Belial, in here. It's an insult. She's even insulting her husband. The complete lack of respect that this man has from his servants and his own family. It's a testament to his character. And then she said, think about his name. Just think about his name for a minute, David. That's all you got to do, and you'll understand what's going on. And as we talked about, names don't mean as much in our society today as what they did in their society. We talked about last week, the name means foolish one. And she's telling David, you don't have to think of anything past what his parents named him to understand who you're trying to deal with here. And then she reminds him, I was not aware of what you had done. I didn't know you had sent men to my husband for payment. The situation would have been handled different, David, if I would have known what was going on. This is what she's trying to tell him here. Any thoughts, any ideas? She continues here as she refers to him as my Lord. Think about the contrast she has. She's referring to her husband as a scoundrel, yet she's referring to him with this title of honor. You notice the Lord here is lowercase. It is a title of honor or respect that they give to another human. And she contrasts it with Lord in uppercase here, meaning the Lord God. So as long as God lives, as on your soul, I knew what you were coming to do. You were coming to shed blood. You were coming to kill all the men and servants in my house. So I find it interesting here. Up until this point, we have no interaction has ever happened between David and Abigail. We have no history that these two have ever met before this day. And yet, she has heard probably the stories of David. She's certainly heard about him killing the Philistine giant. She's probably heard about his conquest in the armies of Saul. And as we read through this, she points out that Saul's trying to kill him. There in verse 26, let your enemies and those who seek to harm you from my Lord be as Nabal. She's pointing out she's heard that Saul is trying to kill David and his men. So she knows of David's reputation. Whether she has ever met him before, as we said, we have no record of that, but she knows of David's character and the reputation that he has, and it's a far better character and reputation than her husband has. And again in verse 27, she's offering the present, the gifts of all of the things that she has prepared, the food that she has cooked, the feast that she has made for David and his men. And then it's interesting here in verse 28. She's asking for forgiveness for not her husband, but for her. We have no record of her even doing anything wrong, but I think she may have felt guilty, or there may have been some type of remorse, at least on her part, that she didn't know David had sent men to see her husband so she could prevent this situation from even happening. And she's apologizing that she didn't know this was happening, that she found out afterwards that these things happened. And she asked for David's forgiveness for her lack of knowledge, or her lack of being able to handle the situation. Yes, ma'am.
So she refers to herself as a handmaid.
I think she's making a contrast here. She's trying to show a lot of humility to him. A handmaid would be a servant in that culture. She's referring to him as Lord, as a master or a ruler. And this is she's trying to put a huge contrast between David and herself. I am elevating you, and I am humbling myself. Remember, David has 400 men with him who are probably still really mad, And once your emotions start taking you down a certain path, it takes a little while to get those in check and start thinking clearly again. And I think maybe she even realizes this, because she gives a pretty long speech to David here. I think she's trying to, okay, everybody calm down. Everybody relax here, okay? Because if you get past me, there's no stopping you. I am the last line of defense for all of these innocent people because of my scoundrel of a husband. Did you have something? Were you raising your hand?
No, not at this time.
Okay, fine. Yes, ma'am.
Why is his vengeance get against the people instead of just Nabal and his family? Why is he going to kill all the men and the children?
Because he feels that Nabal is responsible for all of them. And I think it's kind of, you are over this house, and I'm going to destroy all of you as an example. Remember when the Israelites were told to go into the land of Canaan, who were they told to destroy? Everyone. Men, women, and children. Even to the point of infant babies. They were told to kill them. And we we see that as very harsh. But God wanted to make sure they removed any pagan influence out of their society, completely and totally. So the mindset 3,000 years ago in the land of Israel was, I don't just kill one person. I don't kill the head of the house. I don't go in and just kill the king and think everybody else is going to follow me now. I'm going to make sure. I'm just going to kill them all. And then I don't have to worry about any of them revolting against me again.
That was Saul's sin. God told him to go in and destroy all. And what did Samuel hear? The baying of the sheep and the cows mooing. He said, what is this noise?
And the king was standing there.
That's right. And that's what the sin was. He did not obey God fully with God's command. And the ball is the same thing. It goes back to the example of when God approached Abraham and did the promise with circumcision. He told Abraham to circumcise not only your boys, your family, your bloodline, every male servant in your household. That was the commandment that was given. This is what God commanded. Nabal was not following that type of commandment. He was not following that type of example. His young men knew that because he was breaking the law of Moses by treating David in such a fashion. He was not allowed to do that. You were brethren in the same tribe in this case, and you were supposed to take care of them. And Paul was not doing that.
Did I see a hand back here? Did somebody else have a hand up? Okay. So, you really see the character of this woman through this. As we said, we would not think, we would not even stop and have any hesitation about a woman being out in society by herself and even coming up and starting a conversation with us, whether we knew her or didn't know her. Now depending on how that conversation goes, it might get a little uncomfortable, but just a woman approaching one of the men in this room would not be unusual in our society. It happens multiple times a day. As Tommy is running his business for how many years, how many women came in to have you service their automobile. And you never talked to their husband, you never saw their husband, you never communicated in any way, shape, or form with another man in that transaction. And that didn't seem strange or weird to you in the least. But 3,000 years ago in the nation of Israel, that would have been unheard of. But this woman is such a character within herself that she understands what's about to happen to her family and the servants. And so you see, she feels an obligation to protect the servants, to protect her household. She comes out, she gives these accolades to David and to his men. As I said, she realizes she is the only one standing in between David and her servants being killed. And she continues on here, the Lord will make you an enduring house. Again, I think this may be an indication in some of the things that she is saying that word is spreading throughout Israel that David has been anointed the next king. Remember, Samuel was told to go and do it very quietly. And only David and his brothers and his father Jesse, I guess, were really aware of what happened that day. But word starts to leak out. If you absolutely want to keep something secret, how many people do you tell? 0. Because eventually somebody's going to say something. David had 7 brothers standing there. I think they started talking. Somebody started talking. And it's gotten back to even as far as Abigail to say, the Lord's going to make you an enduring house. And then, as we said, she points out, a man has risen to pursue you and to seek your life. This is a reference, I think, to King Saul. She understands you're fleeing from Saul. And she realizes also, as it said, that he has anointed you, or appointed you, rather, a ruler over Israel. So she realizes, I think the indications are just there, people have heard, they're starting to learn, David has been anointed the next king. And then she brings out, she's asking him either do not shed blood without cause, do not avenge yourself, but when the Lord has dealt with my Lord, then remember your maidservant. She's reminding David here, God is going to avenge you. David, let God take care of this. Don't go shed the blood yourself. Don't go take this into your own hands. Let God deal with the situation. So you see a great amount of faith in this woman that God is going to take care of the situation. And it may be that this woman is wanting out of this relationship with Nabal. How would that marriage have been arranged at that point? Nabal's parents, Nabal's father, would have gone to Abigail's father and made the arrangement. This was not, Nabal went out and courted Abigail for a while, and they went on long walks in the evening and sat by the babbling brook and talked about things and decided to get married. It's even possible she never even met him until the day of the ceremony. That is how arrangements were done. It was just, whether it was based on a already family or friendship relation, sometimes it was for a financial benefit. A dowry was paid one way or another. They had arranged marriages. So she may have been, secretly hoping to get out of this relationship. Also keep in mind, under the law of Moses, who could file for a right of divorce? Husband. Again, wife has no say. So David here even admits, you're right, and you're going to keep me from shedding blood that day. We would say she's talked a little sense into him. Okay? You ever had somebody talk some sense into you when you stop and listen to them? I know, Patty, I need to listen to you more. You would help me out if I would just listen to you more. That's what you're sitting there thinking. And David understands what she has done. So again, something very unusual is happening here. We don't really pick up on it. David is admitting, this woman has better counsel than me right now. Remember, how is Abigail described at the beginning of chapter 25 when we're first introduced to her? She is a woman of good understanding and beautiful appearance. She's got a good head on her shoulders. She knew how to handle this situation, even if it was culturally very different than what would normally be happening. And then David tells her, the promise I made was no one in your house was going to live till the morning. He tells her to return in peace to her house. So he takes the feast that she had brought to him and his men, and he tells her, go back home. We're not going to attack. We're not going to avenge ourselves. And then, again, we see more of the character of Nabal here. So, while his wife is out preventing his household, or all the men in her house, from being killed by David and his men, what's her husband doing? He's home having a party. He doesn't even realize the ramifications that his actions had. It doesn't seem that he was even aware of the danger his house was in. It wasn't like he was telling his servants, okay, David and his men are coming. We need to try to defend ourselves. We need to build some fortifications. We need to... He's just, I'm having a party. I'm going to get drunk. I'm celebrating. I'm feasting like a king. You really see the contrast in the characters in this relationship. And he becomes very drunk. So the next morning, Abigail, his wife, tells him what's happening. Do you not realize, you don't even realize you almost died last night. You almost realized, or you almost did not wake up this morning. I saved your life. I saved the life of everybody else in this house. And you're home having a party. And again, as Tommy pointed out, it says that he's here, he was feasting like a king. We're not told who was with him. This may be an indication, as Tommy pointed out, there wasn't anybody with him. He made this big feast for himself. Look at how great I am. You know, even when Saul was holding these feasts of the new moon, there were other people there feasting with Saul. This man makes a feast fit for a king. He either doesn't invite anybody, or nobody likes him well enough to come. Maybe both. Yes?
But didn't he say he was, when he told David's men that he was going to have a feast for his shearers?
He said that. He said, why should I take from my men and give to you? So he may be partying it up with his men, but we're not told that is that actually the case, you know. And his wife tells him what has happened. His wife tells him what is done. And basically the life comes out of him. And maybe he finally realizes what kind of person he is. You know, as you live long enough, you have experiences, you have interactions that have a profound influence on you, that you hold on to, that those memories stick with. You know, this one seems to finally get some understanding in Nabal. Wow. After 10 days, the Lord strikes him dead. It's interesting here, even within these 10 days, it doesn't say that there was any indication that he was going to change. And maybe God waited 10 days to try to see if there would be some remorse, repentance on the part of Nabal. That's supposition on my part. I don't know why it took 10 days. It's complete supposition here. Yes?
So it said, when Abigail was telling Nabal about what she did, his heart was hardened, so does that mean he had a stroke?
is used throughout the Bible to mean someone just became very stubborn. I don't think it means that there was anything physically happened to the heart muscle. I think it just, they became very stubborn in their mind, that no matter what you say or do, I'm not going to change. And maybe that was the indication here. His heart became like a stone, is I don't see anything wrong with what I did. I'm not going to change. It's who I had in mind when I said, yes, that he hardened his heart. Our vernacular would be, they became very stubborn. And the Lord struck him, and he died. David hears of what happens, and he praises God that he did not reach out and strike Nabal dead himself, that God took care of the situation. And how does David really respond to it? I'm going to go propose to Abigail. She's described as a beautiful woman with a good head on her shoulders. I could do worse. Go see if I can get her as my wife. Now, something your book does not bring out, and something that I looked into and I could not find it in any of the commentaries that they would talk about this. Who was she actually, whose responsibility did she become? Under the law of Moses, she became, if Nabal had a brother, then she became betrothed to him. And all of his possessions would go to Nabal's oldest brother, and so on down the line. And if Nabal did not have a brother, then it was whoever the closest kinsman was. Remember the story of Ruth and Boaz, when Boaz tells Ruth, I can take you as my wife, but there is a closer kinsman who has first priority under the law of Moses. And Boaz had to go and negotiate, and you can read about that in Ruth chapter 4. But the other kinsman determines he does not want to take Ruth as his wife, so she is then entitled or allowed to marry Boaz. There's two possibilities here. We talked about these men are both from the tribe of Judah. There may have been a close family relationship that allowed David to fulfill the law of Moses and marry Abigail. We're not told that's the case. Or Nabal had absolutely no other family to fulfill this obligation. Because not only does David, under the law of Moses, is David going to get Abigail as a wife, and it says that she brings 5 maidservants with her. Guess what David gets? 3,000 sheep, 1,000 goats. He gets all of the wealth of the house of Nabal. That all becomes David's when he enters into this relationship. Had Nabal had a closer kinsman, he would have had priority, or he would have had the first right to marry Abigail and to assume all of that wealth for himself. So I couldn't find any commentator that wanted to comment on why David was allowed to marry Abigail. We're just not given what the relationship was or what the details around it were. But keep in mind, there were laws regarding a widow under the law of Moses. So David does take Abigail to be his wife. Interesting here, Patty. She says, here's your maidservant to wash the feet of the servants of my Lord. I'm just saying it's in the Bible, Patty. And Abigail rides with her 5 maids, and she becomes David's wife.
But it also says that he took on somebody that we don't even know as a wife as well.
Yes, he does at the end of chapter 25. He tells Ahina, her name, of Jezreel as a wife. And remember, he already had Michal. And when Saul, I think, hears about this, he takes Michal, gives her to another man. David is eventually going to take her back. When we get to 2 Samuel, David actually has more wives. I think he ends up with 5.
No, he has 7.
7?
Bathsheba's his last wife. According, that's all that we know of. He may have had a lot of fun. He had lots of concubines.
No. No. Any other thoughts? Any other comments here? As we're rapidly running out of time this morning. All right, we will close here for the day. Thank you for your thoughts and comments. We'll take a short break, and we actually next week skip quite a bit to David actually being king.